Bree, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, here with my co-host and dear friend, Melissa McDaniel. She is a choreographer, creator, social justice advocate. Today we're answering another serious topic. We had another one last week too. What do we do as educators when a student confides in us about sexual abuse? And I will say personally, having gone through this a couple times, the instincts for me were not correct at times. And you definitely want to get angry and you want to get upset and you want to do all kinds of things that, research shows us not to do. And we're going to learn a little bit more about why that is today. There's a lot of work to do in the dance industry to better protect our students from sexual predators, and work we can do to educate ourselves on spotting warning signs, as well as understanding the proper steps to take to make sure our students feel protected and safe, and that our parents feel that their children are protected and safe with their confidence and with just frankly their children. So before we introduce our guest panelists for this very important episode and topic, I want to give a few reminders. Throughout this episode, you're going to see Melissa and me looking around all over the place. We have monitors everywhere. We're monitoring our friends on Zoom, and we're monitoring our friends on Facebook, and even pulling people in off Instagram to try to really promote the conversation and get people engaged, because that's what we're here for. We're here to share perspectives and hopefully give people some insight on how to make things better in their daily lives. And we want this conversation to be accessible, so please do share and contribute. So again, pop any comments in the chat and on Zoom. We'll make sure we get your questions and comments answered throughout the conversation. And Melissa, let's get to it. Let's introduce Lee.
Great. I cannot wait to introduce Lee for the second time.
They are back.
Yes, again, they came back again. So I want to first start with the letting everybody know that if you need to protect your peace or leave the conversation because this conversation is triggering to you, please do so. We do not want anyone to suffer through or feel pain while we are having this discussion. And we understand that this may be a reality for a lot of you, either as a victim of abuse or someone who has had to help a student through it. So please make sure that you take any steps that you need to make sure that you are safe while we have this conversation, and you can come and join us back anytime. And then as far as introducing Lee, I do want to highlight that Lee is queer and non-binary. So you will notice us using pronouns throughout the show, the pronouns them and they, which are their preferred pronouns. See, I did it right there, which are their preferred pronouns. So Lee Whitzling, the second time expert with us here on Beyond the Steps, is a dancer and therapist living in Southern Vermont. Lee grew up in the dance studio world where they studied tap, ballet, and jazz in St. Louis, Missouri for 12 years before finding the happy place in modern and improvisational techniques. They spent 3 years with Illinois-based modern dance company Back to the Left Productions. Lee has a master's degree in dance movement therapy and counseling from Antioch University, New England, and has worked as a school counselor, a residential dorm head, a dance teacher, and now works in private practice, psychotherapy, primarily working with trans and gender non-conforming adolescents. We are so happy to have you back, Lee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa, for that introduction. It's always like just a nice little shock to hear about myself. So I appreciate it. I just want to start. What do you say?
Wonderful things.
Oh, thank you. I just want to start by reiterating what Melissa said, that this is a really, really hard topic. I've gone through this process of having someone confide in me several times before, and every time it feels hard. Even as someone who's coming on as the expert talking about this, it still feels hard. And even in this moment, I even feel my nervous system activating a little bit because it's a heavy, heavy topic. So with that, I do want to say, leave this conversation if right now is not the right time for you. Come back to it when it feels good. The whole point of this conversation is for us to talk about how we can show up as adults who are ready and are able to support kids. If we're not able to do that, we're not going to be super helpful. So even with this conversation, I want to just ask us to take it really, really slow. Right now, even myself in this moment, I'm sitting with my feet up cross-legged. I'm going to move my feet to the ground. I'm just going to ground myself. I'm putting my back really up against a pillow. I'm getting myself really grounded for this conversation. So I invite you to do the same thing. If you need to take a few breaths, put your hand on your heart, really bring your nervous system down and be here with us if it feels okay to do that right now. Take pauses, do what you need to do, drink your water, get comfy, close your eyes, whatever you need to do to be in this conversation, either right now or if you're watching it later. You have so many skills on your own to do that. And I'm happy to meet with any of you after if you want some more skills for that. So let's just move really slowly today. And as we head into this conversation, I also just want to say that this is not a full training. We cannot cover all of this in an hour. It's the same for all of your topics every week. But know that if you still have questions when you leave, it's okay. And there are a lot of resources out there, a lot more training you can get. But right now, we're just going to talk about how to show up and be present in a conversation in the moment a little bit.
Thank you, Lee. That is great tips. Right when you said that, I had to uncross my legs and put them on the ground. So I've already taken one of your tips so far. So thank you so much for leading us out with that. And I want to get into one of the questions that I have is, as a dorm head and a school counselor, you work with children, or you have worked with children when they are at their most vulnerable. What kind of emotional support is it that a student, and particularly an adolescent, needs most when they have been a victim of sexual abuse?
Yeah, listening to them, believing them, and then advocating for them.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing is that someone might be sharing with you something really, really important that happened with them. And they need to be heard, and they need someone to just sit there and say, I hear you. I've heard what you said, and I believe that what you're saying is true. They need to be honored as actual small adults, especially teenagers are really soon to be adults. I think it's really easy to silence kids and not believe them. You'll see my dog moving around back here, sorry. And they need to be believed because they've been holding onto a secret for a really long time. And to be brave enough to come out and share that information with you is really, really big. So just to say, I'm here and I believe what you say, that's the biggest thing that you can do above everything else.
For those of us, a lot of people may not realize how common sexual abuse is in children. What does the research show us on how often children are suffering sexual abuse? And what, if any, is the most common age that we're seeing this happen with?
Sure. So to answer that question, let me give a couple different examples of what we're actually talking about when we're talking about sexual abuse. And I know this is a hard topic to actually acknowledge and state what we're talking about out loud. So there's sexual abuse that happens from adults. It could be from a parent, or it could be from another adult in the family, an aunt, an uncle, a family friend. This could be, molestation. It could be inappropriate touching. This is one form of abuse. There's another form of abuse which happens between minors, older siblings, things like that, but also could happen between teenagers, people who are dating, people who know each other, sometimes people who might not even know that they're sexually abusing someone else because they're also a minor and also young and are not informed about what's happening. So unfortunately, child sexual abuse is really, really common. 1 in 4 girls will experience some kind of sexual abuse during her lifetime. 1 in 9 of those is by an adult. 1 in 9 girls will be sexually abused by an adult. So sometimes that happens, between minors with teenager on teenager. 1 in 9 girls will be abused by an adult. It's a little bit less for boys. About 1 in 20 boys will experience sexual abuse, about 1 in 53 by an adult. Those statistics will change a little bit depending on the different studies that you look at, but that's the range that we're talking about. And of course, just to mention that those statistics don't include trans individuals or children who are transgender. Statistics that we do not know are that 50% of transgender people are sexually abused during their lifetime. And some of those are as children.
That's staggering.
So it's really prevalent. So let's just sit with that for a minute before even moving on. Because what that means is that if you're watching this and you work with children, you do know somebody, probably multiple people, who have been sexually abused, and you may or may not know about it. So this applies to all of us.
There's been a lot of things coming to light in the dance industry in particular over the past year. There's just been a lot of disturbing, I wouldn't even say the last year, it's been going on for a while, but it just seems to be at an excessive level this past year. And being aware of emotional and physical cues in our students is really important as an educator, period, right? Like, you need to know when your students are having a bad day, why they might be having a bad day, so that you can proceed accordingly. And every child is different in the way that they need to be nurtured, right? So what are some obvious signs of sexual abuse that we should be looking for in children and be aware of? What are those signs?
Yeah, well, they might be a little bit different depending on age range. And you did ask about the statistics of age and when it happens. So sexual abuse can happen to anyone of any age. I mean, starting unfortunately at infancy. So there's not a particular age when it does or doesn't happen, but 2/3 of childhood sexual abuse do happen with children who are 12 to 17. So it's most common that we're talking about teenagers. So I'll speak just for a minute about younger kids, but then we'll focus a little more on teenagers, because I think that feels more relevant or is more common. With younger kids, things that you might want to be looking for are physical signs, like a lot of rubbing or scratching the genitals, pain in the genitals, being unable to sit, or if you do for any reason see a child changing or something in the dressing room, depending on how your studio is set up, bruises or bleeding and things like that. Behaviorally, you will also sometimes see younger children acting out sexually or using a lot of sexual language. And with younger children especially, but also with older kids and teenagers, they might not know that something bad is happening, or at least, they might have an internal feeling about that, but they might not be able to articulate that. So they might not say, I'm being hurt, or even if you ask them, is someone hurting you? That's not always going to be helpful language, because they might not know that. They just know that they're being touched. So that's a little bit about younger kids. Older teenagers, things can show up in a lot of different ways, most often through struggling with their mental health, depression, anxiety. Usually this is some form of post-traumatic stress. PTSD can form. For some people, they might start having multiple sex partners if that's out of their norm. That's not to say that multiple sex partners is really normal for some people, but that might be out of someone's norm. Having a lot more sex or acting out sexually in some ways. Also, drugs and substance use is really common. And again, that's not to say that many people don't also use drugs and substances for other reasons. It's not an automatic sign, but all of those things together can be some indicators. Another really important thing is someone who maybe previously didn't do this before, but all of a sudden is shying away from physical touch. This is really important for us to pay attention to as dance teachers, studio owners, because we are working with people's bodies all the time. So I just want to throw out a reminder to use consent all the time, even if you're used to touching people's bodies, even if it's the norm, just gentle, like, hey, can I put my hand on my back to correct you? All the time, all the time. And if someone says no, don't do it. Just quick little reminder there. But someone really shrinking away or looking nervous about touch can be a really big indicator.
Thank you so much for that reminder. Moving through class, I know many times I just go in for
instinctual. It is. It's instinctual to just, manipulate and look, you just reach out and grab sometimes.
Yeah. And just a reminder that it doesn't have to be a big deal. We don't have to stop every class and say, is it okay for me to, it doesn't have to be this scary thing. Hey, can I place my hand on your shoulder? No. Okay. Well, I'm just going to verbally tell you, and then you move on. It doesn't have to be a big deal.
Right. So kind of in that same vein, I think asking for consent and remembering to do that is part of setting a culture and a tone in your studio for safety. How do we set the tone for our students to feel comfortable to confide in us if they are having personal problems like sexual abuse? How do we create that space?
Yeah. The answer to this is on one hand really complex, but on the other hand also really simple. I think it really is as simple as just staying around class for a few minutes so someone can talk to you if they want to, asking your students about their lives. I mean, people come to dance studios for a lot, as you know, as dance teachers, for a lot more than just to come and move and dance. I shared it the last time I was on here, if any of you happen to see me, that both my grandmother came during World War II to a dance studio to escape, and my mom went to a dance studio to escape a really scary family situation, and it was our safe haven. So many of your students feel that safe haven in their dance studio. If someone is being sexually abused at home or somewhere else in the world, and they're coming to your studio to express their body and make their body big and take up space with it, that is an incredibly healing thing. So first, just to have the awareness that that might be something you're doing is such a powerful thing to hold and to not take that lightly. So I think just holding that and owning that and naming it with your students, naming that you're not just there to train them into professional dancers, or that might be something your studio does, but you're really raising humans that are going to become adults. And then on a practical level, just being present, checking in with people, saying, how is your day? What's going on? Like, hey, I heard your dad was sick. How's he feeling? Hey, I know you had that big thing at school. How'd it go?
You're saying more one-on-one, not as a group with the class. You're saying making that connection with them on an individual level.
Yeah. And also when things happen in a group, I do think that those, there are little indicators that you're someone people can talk to. It can be overwhelming if you constantly are going up to someone and asking them what's going on, if they feel overwhelmed. But the more you do that in a group shows that you're interested and you care about their lives too. So just really consistent showing up at the beginning. I remember even for myself in my junior year of high school, I had a chemistry teacher who just took attendance by like asking a get to know you question every day. And I still remember that like years later, just because he showed that he cared about something that was going on in our lives. Take attendance by saying like, what's your favorite candy? Those little things. I'm not saying that question in and of itself is like gonna prepare you, but those little things add up. And also just put resources out in your studio to mental health hotlines, local community resources, anything that's related to support for teenagers or information about sexual assault, information about taking care of your body, information about anything that you feel passionate about or that you feel like you want to be someone people could talk to you about. Put pamphlets out, put resources out so people see, oh, my teacher cares about this. Okay, maybe they have some information about this. Maybe I could go talk to them.
Right. I have to just stop and pause for a moment about understanding that the studio can be a healing space for people. That is, not that our work doesn't have purpose, because I think we all teach for not to teach professional dancers, but to help
the whole human
and raise and educate children, like to have that relationship with kids and have them have a relationship with dance. And to foster that relationship. So to understand that, we may have a dancer who's not there to be a rockette, but they are there because they need healing. And we are fostering that as well. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So thank you for that. When it comes to this topic, I am sure there are some very clear reactions or responses that are unfortunately probably very natural, but they aren't correct or they can be harmful. So and some that are very affirming and supportive too. So they're on both sides of it. There's some reactions on both. Can you give us like 2 or 3 ones that are do's and 2 or 3 that are don'ts?
Yeah. Do say thank you. Say thank you for telling me. Just know that this person took so much bravery to come forward and tell you about something that's happening. Do take it seriously, even if in your mind you're thinking, oh, that might be not such a big deal. They told you because it's a big deal to them. And they also might be testing your reaction. If you take this seriously, then you'll be able to take something else seriously. You might just be scratching the surface. It's unlikely that this person is telling you the entire story right then and there. So really take it seriously and tell them that they did the right thing by telling you. And asking what they need right then and there. Ask them what they want. Part of sexual abuse involves taking away someone's power, taking away someone's ability to be in control of their body. Right then and there, if you can give them as much control as they can have over the situation, that is the start of healing. So that's really important. Practically speaking, also not right in the moment. In the moment, you want to be there with them, but you do want to write down what they told you. You want to remember everything because there is going to be a process after this. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, and that varies depending on where you are, what policies are, what state you are in. So I can't give you an overall exactly what to do because it is going to depend. But I'll give you some ideas of what might happen next. Don't tell them you're not going to tell anyone. This is the hardest part. It's really hard. When someone comes to you, it's because they've been told for a long time, either quite literally and verbally, or they've gotten this idea. They've been told it's a secret. And so telling is a really vulnerable thing. You can't say that you're not going to tell anyone. Especially because you're probably in this conversation right now because you're not fully equipped to know what to do next. And so you have to ask for support and have to ask for help. And when abuse happens, you need other people involved. You can be really clear with the child, with the teenager, whoever it is, about what you're going to do next. You can say really clearly to them, I really do have to tell someone, and I'm doing this because even though I'm an adult, I'm not a magic adult, and I don't have all the answers, and I need support so that I can support you. You can tell them exactly what you're going to do to give them as much control as you possibly can. I think this is where a lot of people go astray. A lot of people think, I want to tell them what they want to hear. Or if I don't tell them all the people I'm going to tell, it'll kind of protect them. That's when it blows up later because they feel like they've been lied to. They feel like they didn't have control, and it really spins out of control. You can earn someone's trust by being as open and honest about your process as you can, and open and honest about when you don't know what to do. I have even myself been in situations where I haven't known exactly what to do. And sometimes I'm not always the person in control of what's going to happen next.
Right.
And you have to say that. Don't hug them without their permission. We're talking about someone who's been touched without their consent. So it's really, really natural to say, thank you so much for telling me, and want to give someone a big hug. Don't do that. As we just talked about, consent is really important. Some people might want that. Some people might really want to be held or hugged. That's not necessarily bad. If someone wants that, totally, but really, really ask before placing a hand on their shoulder or before doing anything. Let them tell you that so they can be in control. And then Bree brought up something at the beginning of this talk, which was about like getting really angry. Don't offer your own commentary on what happened, because this child is just starting to form their own story maybe about what happened. And sometimes, especially with little kids, but even for older kids, even for adults, they might not even recognize what they're sharing as abuse. They might not be coming to you saying, this was abuse or I was assaulted. It's even possible that they believe they're in a relationship with an adult or that they love this person. That's not always the case. Sometimes people are very aware they've been harmed. But telling someone, oh, this is wrong or that was horrible can really, really shake them up. So in the moment, really just say, thank you for telling me, and I believe you, and your story matters to me. Your own commentary or your thoughts or your anger matter for you, not in that moment.
Right.
That being said, they do matter for you. Please go get them out. Find a place, find your most trusted confidant, someone who's going to be completely confidential, whoever it is that you call next. Find a place, talk to your therapist, whoever it is, and get that feeling out so that you don't bring it back to that student. Find a place later where you can get that out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's wonderful. You know, a lot of the things you said would be the first reaction that I would have. A hug. Yeah. I couldn't even imagine what it would take for me for a student that I've been with and taught and love to say something like that and me not go, oh my gosh. Like it just
immediate. Yeah.
It makes so much sense. Like that could be very triggering or very harmful to them to do that. And also I'm not going to tell anybody, because that's usually the first thing a lot of students will say. Can you not tell anybody? You're like, yeah. And then you realize, like you say, you're in a quandary because you have to tell somebody or else this won't stop. If you can't stop the cycle yourself. I think that we kind of may have, my follow-up question was about panic mode. This will send people into panic mode. And what do you do to make space for yourself to find out or to do what's next, but also manage the feeling of that you might be sending a child back into an abusive situation? Like, I feel like you instantly want to protect them and keep them and hold on to them. But a lot of times you can't do that until you get authorities involved, correct?
Right. So first, I want to just offer a total reframe of what's happening, because it's instinctual when this happens. If someone comes to you and says they're being abused, or even if they don't say those words, they tell you something where you go, this is abuse, this is bad. In your mind, you're going, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. This is horrible. This is the worst moment of my life. It's going to feel that way. It really is. It still feels that way to me every time. However, as we know, and this is not good news, this is the hard part, child sexual abuse is happening. It's happening right now. It's happening every day. And unfortunately, it is happening to people that you know. When someone tells you, that is the moment that change gets to start to happen. That is the moment that healing starts to happen. This moment is an amazing, amazing and good moment. It doesn't feel good for you as the adult because you're finding out about it. It sucks. There's no other word for it. It sucks. But for the child, this is an amazing turnaround moment. It might not feel good for them in the moment either. But in terms of the process, there's a shift happening. So if you can take a moment and pause and just stop and say, this is not the worst moment. This is not the moment that the abuse is happening. This is the moment that we're shifting into change and shifting so that healing can happen. Wow. Shifting so that we can stop this. That will stop you from panicking. This is the good moment. The child who's with you is safe right now while they're telling you. They're not being abused right now in this moment. That's amazing. If you were watching it happen, that's a different story, but you're not hearing about it. The panic is in your body and it's not actually in the world. So come back to those grounding techniques, put your feet on the ground, put your back against your chair, do some breathing, use all the grounding techniques that you have and slow down. And I know I'm taking a long, slow answer to this question because that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I love it. It's what you're saying is so helpful and it's so important. And it seems so simple, but a lot of it's not instinctual. So it's so important. I'm going to ask you a multi-part question. I have a lot of different pieces to this question, but when a student confides in you about their experience, who you approach and how in different scenarios. There's a handful of different things I'm going to throw your way right now. First, what if the child, what is your response? I know you said you can't promise them that you're not going to say anything. What if the child specifically asks you not to say anything, period, or not to say anything to their parents?
Yeah. So this is where it gets really tricky. So I'm going to back up a little bit before even answering that specific question, just to locate like what's actually going to happen next. Because there's the moment of being with the child, and then there are things that happen next. I feel like it's really important to spend a lot of time thinking about what happens in those moments with the child, because most trainings focus on what happens next. That being said, I'm not going to ignore it because there are lots of steps to take.
Right.
So like I said, I can't give a full training on what to do because one, it varies from state to state in terms of your legal requirement. What I'm talking about is in most states, people who work with children are considered mandated reporters, which means they're required to tell the state when someone is being abused. So that's what the law says. I can't walk through all 50 states right now, but it is really easily Googleable. So you can look up your state and there are online trainings on what exactly that means and on what exactly defines abuse as well, because those definitions change from state to state, which is really, really tricky, which is why we can't do all of this right now. In addition to that, there's a whole lot of nuance here about involving the state, involving law enforcement, especially when we're thinking about our students of color, families of color, families who are in poverty, and how these different organizations and institutions interact with different people from different communities. We can't get into all of the nuance in this conversation. So I want to take a minute to acknowledge that what happens next is going to be really specific to what your resources are, meaning what the laws are, what your community resources are that you are connected to, who you know, who you're able to connect with, which is why my advice is to make those connections, and what your resources are, meaning your own capacity and ability to see what's going on and understand what you're able to do. If I've lost you here, that's okay. We're going to slow down because this is really complex. But I just want to make sure I acknowledge that what happens next is really going to depend on your studio and its philosophy. And so your studio and whoever works there need to really figure out what your philosophy is around this and work with that. So just want to put that little disclaimer out there that there's a lot of different moving pieces that are really hard, that we can't quite get to in this. We've got 25 minutes left, but I can get to as much as we can. So
there's no protocol there is a protocol statewide on how to handle this with authorities. But as far as parents go and sharing it with, if you don't feel safe telling their parents or they ask you not to tell their parents or not to tell anyone, we know you said do not promise that you won't say anything, but there is no requirement or structured do this or that, don't do this or do that about telling parents or sharing with parents.
Right. So what I'll say about this is that for most states, some states may have particular laws about this, as if you go through a training, you can read about this in your state. But for the most part, the laws relate to interaction with the state itself. The laws don't say anything about parents, about what you tell the actual family. So what this means is you do have some of your own authority to really determine what feels safe and what doesn't. So my initial reaction is, one, don't make this decision on your own. I mean, bring in someone who knows what they're talking about. Like I just said, form those community relationships. Have a relationship right now with someone who is a social worker, a mental health counselor, someone who you regularly talk to. If you're a studio owner or someone who's, working regularly with dancers or things that you could end up in a situation like this, you should have some community connections so that they can inform you on what to do in this particular scenario. I I'm not going to give a blanket statement on yes or no, because it could be that a child is informing you that they are being abused by their parents.
Right.
It could be that a child is saying they're being abused by somebody else. It could be that they're saying they're being abused by somebody else and they've told their parents and their parents don't believe them. My general rule of thumb, I'm going to say, is if you have a relationship with these parents and a child is telling you something about the parents, or I mean about someone other than the parents, call them up. But talk to the child and say, this is going to happen, or would you like me to do this with you, or would you like to be here with me while I do this, or would you like me to be here with you while you do this? If you are in a position where you're a mandated reporter and you are making a call to the state is going to contact the family. You're not going to keep this a secret from the family. So that's where the decision making comes in, is you know this family, I'm assuming, or at least know the child. You can make decisions about how that information gets to the family in a way that's going to protect the child. So what I'm going to offer as my piece of advice, because I can't give a clear-cut answer on yes or no, or do this, don't do this, is what is going to support this child who has been abused in feeling the safest and going back to the safest situation? That is the question you have to ask.
Yeah.
If you find yourself asking a question, how will I maintain a relationship with this family so they keep coming to my dance studio? That's the wrong question.
Right.
Find yourself asking the question, what if rumors spread in my studio, or I do the wrong thing, or people think that I did the wrong thing? That's the wrong question. The question has to be, how do I keep this person safe? It has to be that and nothing else.
Okay, next part of this question. Thank you. This is all really helpful. What if you're in a situation where another student comes to you and confides that they are concerned that there has been abuse to another student in their class, their group, their peer group, whatever?
Yeah, this is really, really tricky. In terms of, okay, so just like legally nuts and bolts.
Right.
Legally nuts and bolts, this is where you get in tricky water, because a lot of like mandated reporting stuff is about suspecting abuse. That language is really unclear. So generally the law is very muddy. What I will say is, if you haven't had someone come and tell you that they're being abused, like probably no one's going to come after you, just from a legal standpoint only. If you don't know about something, you don't know about something. Again, that's purely legal, but it's not ethical. From an ethical standpoint, gosh, it is a really hard.
I'm going to be honest. My reaction would be, I need to find out if this is true. I need to find out from the child. But is that for if there is a potential victim of abuse and they didn't come to you, is it harmful to them if they have been abused and aren't ready to speak on it yet?
Right.
Or, God forbid, this is like, just misunderstanding and miscommunication, or another child who is just, assuming or throwing things out that aren't true, which, I mean, that happens. How do you get to the bottom of that? I don't know that I'm being honest. I don't know that I could sit back and just go, I'm going to do nothing with this information.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And this is where one of those pieces gets really tricky, as someone who's like, I'm a mental health counselor. So the way that I might manage this, or I might sit back on information and watch things unfold in a little bit different way because of the way that I'm trying to be looking for nuance. Gosh, this one is so hard. And I would say, generally speaking, if you have relationships with these kids, then you should be communicating with them.
Yeah.
But you are not an investigator.
Right.
It is not your job to go and pressure someone into telling you something. Imagine a scenario in which it is true that a child is being harmed. They are being abused by another adult. And then you as an adult come in with the intention of really pushing them, that's going to feel really overwhelming, and they're going to feel even smaller. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do is show up, be checking in with that kid, but really gently, by creating space in the ways that we talked about before for them to come to you. Saying like, hey, I really noticed that you've been missing a lot of class lately. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Is there anything you want to talk about? If they say no, they're saying no. And just like I said before, asking for consent is so important. Let them be in charge. This one is really hard. But what I will say is that almost nothing is as imminent a crisis as we think it is. It's really easy for our nervous systems to be up here and think, I have to solve it this minute. If someone is being abused, especially in an ongoing way, it's probably true that it's probably been happening for a while. Trying to solve it in the moment when you're up here isn't going to make it go well. So I would say you hear about it, you go home, and you contact those people in your life who really know how to do this stuff. You contact your mental health counselor, your social worker, your people in the field who really have experience with this, your local organizations who work with sexual assault, and you have them talk you through what to do.
And in the meantime, you're checking in with this child and gently just observe. You're using all of your senses and observing things.
Yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard for me hearing you say it. And I can't imagine being in that moment. But okay, last part of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the next one. But if they come to you, they confide in you this information, and they don't name somebody, they don't put an identity on their abuser. Yeah. Do you try to get the name out of them, or do you leave that alone? That's not the most important thing, I would assume.
Yeah, it's not your job. Your job is not to be an investigator. There are other people who work in that field who literally are investigators. That's their job. Your job is to be their teacher, or whoever you are in their life, their mentor, their support. They came to you because they wanted to share their feelings with you. They didn't come to you because they wanted you to be an investigator.
The details are not, whatever they want to share is the most important thing. And the details of that beyond that are not relevant in that moment.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that I share that, there are a lot of different things that can happen after abuse. And most commonly, one thing that happens is there is some sort of investigation. Whether this is, if it's something that happened at school, it could be through their school. If it's something that happened, law enforcement is often involved, which is really tricky and complicated. But in any type of investigation, this involves telling a story over and over and over again. And that is re-traumatizing. It is so traumatizing for that child. So if you're pushing for those details, all you're doing is making them tell you something that they're then going to have to repeat. Yeah. So what you want to do is write down what they did tell you, and make sure you have as much information as you do have, but don't push them to say more. I will say, if you do ever have to interact with law enforcement, they're going to ask you a lot of questions, and they might say, why didn't you know about this? What did they tell you about this? Did you ask them about this? And you will just say, no, they didn't say anything about that. And that is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was all very, very helpful. And I know Elizabeth Kessler here on Zoom had a question. I think I answered it, but Elizabeth, let us know if you have additional questions or need additional clarity there. Moving on to the next segment, what kind of training, a lot of times as a studio director or an owner, maybe you're not the one that's with the kids a majority of the time. Maybe it's your faculty. What kind of training can we provide our faculty to ensure they understand how to handle these types of situations, or know, at the very least, they need to let the studio director know that this is happening, or they don't? What is the protocol there?
Yeah, so generally most institutions will have, whatever the training is specific to your state. So that's like just a legal thing. So you can look up whatever the laws are for reporting child abuse in your state. Again, I will say that mandated reporting is really complicated, and you should also have a conversation with your studio about your philosophy around that. But the training itself for what that looks like and what the legal requirements are really straightforward, and usually it's like an online training that everyone should take. So
Should
yeah.
take, but in the dance industry, because there's very little regulation, that's not happening. And I mean, if we're going to be super honest, yes, there are these state mandates, but dance studios kind of fall in this gray area for some reason when
Mhm.
it comes to mandates and training and working with children. There's just not a whole lot of requirement there.
Mhm.
So do you decide as a studio owner, this is what we're going to do? Or, I mean, are there places where your faculty can get trained? Are you allowed to require your faculty to have that training in order to be employed in your business, even though it's not technically a legal requirement?
Right, you're allowed. I mean, you're allowed as a studio owner
Right.
to have your faculty trained in any training that you want to have them trained in. Yeah, let me actually think about like a really specific training that would be like more broad countrywide, and send it along, because I don't have like one particular one that I love in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, well, Melissa, you go. You ask your question, because my question actually was wrapped together. So go ahead.
Background checks. Background checks are not a requirement in our industry. Like Bree said, we have no regulation, which totally needs to be changed, but that's another show. And a lot of times background checks don't pick up everything. They'll do criminal offenses, or but they won't, there's not accusations or anything included. And sometimes sexual abusers or predators are not included in their background checks. So as educators, what should we be doing to vet staff members properly? And not only staff members, but dance studios are like a revolving door. We have photographers, guest choreographers, workshops, conventions. Like what can we vet?
I'm going to piggyback on that too, because a lot of times it's not that the background check doesn't include those things. It's that this person has been engaging in this abuse for so long, whether it be a guest teacher, choreographer, photographer, whoever, this person you're bringing in to work with your students. There's rumors, and there have been lots of stories reported, but nothing has ever legally been done about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is nothing showing up on the background check. It renders the background check completely useless. What do you do?
Right. You're hitting a really important question for you, Melissa.
Right.
So, the answer is not pretty. The answer is you might not be able to vet everybody. Not you might, you won't be able to vet everybody. That's real and honest. So the way that I want to answer this question is actually to say that it's not a useful framework to think, okay, how can we be sure that none of these scary sexual predators get into the doors of our studio and hurt our children? That's what we want to do, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's like logically where my brain goes and how it works. Thinking that way, though, doesn't really help us, because child sexual abuse thrives on secrecy. Like you said, accusations are made, people don't believe them. All of this thrives on the idea of an adult telling a child to keep a secret. This is our little secret, don't tell anyone. All of this happens so under the rug. It happens for years and years and years. I mean, I'm like, my brain instantly goes to like gymnastics and the Larry Nassar case.
Yes.
This stuff goes on forever. So I can't even say, have community connections, because someone can say this is an amazing person. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So I know that that's scary and doesn't feel good, but what it means is we actually just need to have an entire worldview shift and culture shift. So instead of thinking about how can we keep these people out of our studio, but let them just exist out in the world, we actually need to think about, from the inside out, how can we create a culture where we're not allowing this to happen and allowing people to feel safe and free and not abusive. And that requires a lot of healing. So, one, in the meantime, it means creating a culture in which if something were ever to happen, your students could come to you and talk to you. It also means that you are helping promote and create a culture where consent happens and where people are not becoming abusers because they are feeling healed. there's a really common saying that hurt people. And that's really true, that a lot of abuse stems from people who have years of abuse or oppression and other lots of really difficult things in their lives. So the more that you can stop that cycle, the more that you can be trauma informed and show up for the people in your community, that's what's really important. Would love to recommend a book that is called Turn This World Inside Out. It's about nurturance culture. It's by someone named Nora Samaran, Samaran. And it's exactly about this. We can't just magically stop rape and abuse and assault, but we can build this culture called nurturance culture, which is the opposite of violence culture. So that book is called Turn This World Inside Out.
Thank you.
No, that's not easy answer to keeping
no,
them all
it's
away.
not. And I think it's something hopefully that as we rebuild the dance industry from this insane time that we've all been living, hopefully that is something that's being taken into consideration, which is a great lead into our next, our last portion, which is homework. We love to, as you know, we love to assign homework. What can our listeners or people that are watching, what can they do in the next 7 days to make a positive stride in this area? What is one thing they can do to improve and educate themselves in the next 7 days?
Yeah, hands down, connect with your community resources. There's a specific reason why I've been vague about sharing resources aside from just naming a book today. And that's because one, like I said, the law is very state to state, so it's hard to give blanket resources, but also because there are so many local organizations that do this really, really well, that respond to sexual violence really, really well. And I'm certain that you have those in your community. So search your town, search your city, and search sexual violence, healing, etc. And there are places that do this, and they usually do trainings on this. So if you find a local organization that can do a training, that would be amazing. But also just call them up and say, this is who I am, and this is this weird limbo where I live in, where I work with children, but I'm not a teacher, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a clergy member. What do I do? What do I need to do? And how can I learn from you?
Well, and honestly, that applies to everything. That applies to physical therapists, doctor, you should have relationships really with all nutritionists, all of these people, because you're working with children, to be able to turn to your students and say, here are a list of resources for whatever it is that you're going through and dealing with. You can proactively have those things ready to go when those situations come up.
Exactly. And build those resources so you're not calling up one of those centers for the very first time. You don't want to call the Center for Violence Prevention in the moment that you've heard about abuse happening. You want to develop
most of these community leaders are happy to have that relationship, or come in and even just talk for free to your students, to your parents. They want that connection. They're really anxious for it. So
exactly. Yeah. So call them up and say, this is who I am, do a training. And then when something does happen, you can say, hey, I know you and I'm really panicking. And then they're going to want to be there. Otherwise, they're going to say, gosh, I really wish you had been there for this training.
Right.
That's exactly what you can do. Just do a Google search, figure out who those people are, call them up and just tell them who you are. You don't have to have any other agenda, but just to say, I want to know who you are in case I ever need you.
Right. And figuring out those state mandates as well for wherever it is that you are in the world. Lee was generous enough to provide a couple additional resources for us here in the Zoom chat. Melissa's going to pop those into Facebook, but Serving Teen Survivors, a Manual for Advocates. There's a link for that resource. And then also the Child Help National Abuse Hotline. We're going to put that number in both chats as well. And of course, obviously, by no means is it everything you need to know, but the STEPS 2020 initiative, we have modules that were donated by professionals in regarding racism, gender equity, sex abuse and prevention, injury prevention, dance medicine and science, nutrition, all of those things. And we have these modules that you can take virtually. You can take that for free if you go to apolloperformance.com, search the STEPS 2020 initiative. It stands for Studios for Equity, Prevention, and Science. So make make sure you're taking that course. It is a free resource. Anytime you can get anything for free, it is so helpful. And it really is a great catalyst and a jumping off point for you to do more work. It'll kind of point you in the right direction. So check that out. And of course, our friends at YPAD donated the sex abuse and prevention module to that STEPS course. They do fantastic work. We talk about no regulation in the industry. They are an organization that is about as close as anyone's gotten, and they're doing fantastic work. We have our first YPAD certified convention coming up. We have a YPAD certified competition. We have studios all over the world really that are getting YPAD certified. And we're going to put the link a way you can get 25% off your YPAD certification as an educator or a studio owner. So Melissa's going to pop that in the chats as well. Your link, follow that link and enter code APOLLA25, all caps APOLLA 25, and that will get you 25% off that certification. So again, that information is in both chats on Facebook and Zoom. Lee, thank you so much. I know, Melissa, you're going to wrap us up.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us, just the audience that's out there, even sitting through this very sensitive topic.
It's heavy.
Uncomfortable. It's heavy. So I do want to thank you and acknowledge everyone who joined the conversation either on Facebook or here on Zoom. And I definitely want to thank Lee for guiding us through that with so much grace and professionalism and making a very heavy topic palatable for us. So thank you, Lee.
Lee, you did an amazing job. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
really.
Thank you so much. And I'll just leave you by saying, just as grounded at the beginning, we talked about this really hard thing. So just like shake it off. That's what I do after these conversations. I brush it off with my body. This is hard stuff. So if you listen to this, do something for yourself after. Get it off of yourself. Go take a shower, whatever it is. Do it in your body.
Right.
It's so hard and heavy, but so important. Thank you very much for your approach to all of that.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to connect with anybody who's interested about this. You can connect with me. My website is just leewitsling.com. You can find me there. Or you can find me on Instagram, lee.wits. You can send questions. I'll answer them on my story, whenever. I'm happy to really keep talking about this stuff anytime.
Thank you.
Please reach out to Lee if you need them, and that could be one of your resources. Reach out, introduce yourself, and let them know that you're interested in the things they're doing. The recording of this full episode is available on Facebook at Apollo Performance and on Instagram through the link in bio at TPDC_on_IG. If you were watching this episode, please share. This is information that we should really disseminate widely, throw the net as wide as we possibly can, because we really want to make a safe space for our dancers. And like you said, our studio is a healing space, and we have to have the tools to be able to heal. So I'm honored to do this work with Lee. I'm honored to do this work with Bree. Oh, Lee and Bree. I'm honored to do this work with Bree. You can find Bree and I here every single Friday at 2 p.m. Covering topics that are important to the dance world. And join us next week, where we have another one that's very timely for this time of year. Next Friday is the 22nd, and it's Stage Fright and Performance Anxiety with Ashley Mowry. So as we're getting ready to take the recital stage, as we're getting ready to take the competition stage, we have to make sure that our dancers are prepared mentally, and some of the obstacles that they may have and challenges they may have with stage fright and anxiety. So we're going to talk about that. But until then, Lee has given us some great work to do in the next 7 days, and we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.